here at the People's History of Horror. We've been gone for a while, but here we are. I'm your host, Aaron.
And I'm Mike. Sorry for the brief hiatus there. Kind of had sickness going around for a while there, but we're back. And today we're discussing The Stand, Part 2.
Yeah, we're back with our friends at The Stand. But before we get into The Stand, I figured we'd do our little, go check out our Facebook and all that kind of stuff and get it out the way now, since we tend to save that for the last couple minutes and sometimes we don't get it in. So we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangecreationco. Same thing with the Facebook.
Several Facebook pages. Check out Strange Creation. We have one for each thing we do.
The
People's History of Horror, Blunt Talk. Do you have one for your blog?
No, I don't have one for my blog, but I have a blog.
Exactly. Check that out.
Yeah.
And while you're checking out all that, go ahead and hit up Amazon, and there's a book you guys need to check out. Aaron, why don't you tell them about it?
Yeah, I published a book of poems. It's just a collection of various poems through my years writing poetry. That's the simple way to put it. It's called Sapient Murmurs of Unusual Substances. And yeah, there's various kinds of stuff. I figured I'd go ahead and read some of that here in a minute when I get it pulled up. But
it's really good. You should check it out. And it's only like $10 for the paperback, $7 for the Kindle.
Yeah, and it's it has some very short poems, like just a couple of lines long, and it has some couple of pages long poems, but I figured I would read that later because I ain't have it pulled up on my phone already. But we are looking to do some other kinds of stuff on YouTube, and the book right now is being read to get up on Audible, so you'll be able to get it on there too. I figured we could pull some of that and have like a preview on our YouTube once it's up and ready to go. So look forward to that. But let's just dive right back into The Stand, since when we last left off The Stand, we were learning to not just dislike Harold, but kind of despise him in a ways, because he's starting to get more problematic. And so we have that tension there at the end between him and Stu. So you want to give us a brief synopsis of the last part that we covered?
Well, that's when Stu and I'm drawing a blank. Glenn. Stu and Glenn meet Franny and Harold, and you can tell Franny has a thing for Stu.
Yeah, like it's
right away.
Yeah, it's a pretty immediate.
And Harold does not like that. He gets a little butthurt.
Yeah, his jealousy.
So he's pretty confrontational with Stu, and Stu pulls him aside and he's like, "Hey, no big deal. I'm not interested. Just let's survive."
Yeah.
So yeah, Harold's kind of a douche, and it's only gonna get worse.
Yeah. And I mean, there's our other group, Larry, who, in my opinion, like we kind of briefly mentioned in the last one, he seems to be more of, I don't want to say the main character because there's not really a main character, but he's a central character in the sense that he sees the most of what's going on, it seems to me, at least up to this point.
Well, he travels the furthest of like every character by far, in my opinion. Like, I might be wrong on that, but
no, I would say Franny, because they come up from Maine. I mean, he technically he travels at the very beginning when he goes from California to New York.
All right, like if we're counting that, yeah, she travels at the end, and then I'm not getting into spoilers. So
Well, for yes, for Larry, I would say that mainly because he saw the most like actual dead bodies
oh yeah,
up to this point, and he's had to deal with the most, I would say direct interaction, other than maybe Stu.
I mean, he dealt with the Lincoln Tunnel.
That's mainly
in part one, and that's
Yeah.
one of the scenes that still stick with you.
And so here we are in a world where, like, we can't really say, the synopsis of the book you read on the back cover, and various places say 99.7% of the population, but they don't know that. There's no way for them to really know that. They just know that, as far as they know, they're the only survivors, each little individual group.
Yeah.
And so here we got 3 groups of people, one led by Stu Redman, and there's Franny and Harold and Glenn that we mentioned.
And don't forget Kojak.
And Kojak, of course. And then you have Nick's group, which is, we'll get to that in, a very short second. And then there's Larry's group. And I kind of want to start with where the book starts with Nick's group. And so we have a super flu that killed all these people, and Nick Andros just left
Shoyo, Arkansas,
where pretty much the whole town is gone.
I think there's one guy still alive in the jail, and he's dying.
Yeah, he's pretty much already. So the next time we see him is at the beginning of this next part, and the first line is literally, "There's a dead man lying in the street in May, Oklahoma." So he's made it from Shoyo, Arkansas, all the way into Oklahoma, and he sees a dude lying in the middle of the road. And here's our introduction to, I don't want to say the most beloved character in this book, but definitely one of the most, and his catchphrase has been memed the most, I would say.
Yeah.
So Tom Cullen sits up in the street and
Moon, that spells Tom Cullen.
Yeah. And so I just want to highlight this interesting aspect of this part of the book where Nick and Tom meet. Is mostly interesting because, of course, Nick is deaf and dumb, so he can't speak, and nor can he hear. And Tom, we learn very quickly, is
he's mentally disabled.
Yeah,
so
some kind of mental disability going on with him.
We don't know what, but he's mentally disabled, and man, the two of them trying to interact with each other is it's quite humorous. Like, it's pretty sad, but it's quite humorous. Very, very frustrating for Nick, at least.
And I want to just mention with, like, we don't know what Tom has, but this was also written when people, like, even the professionals didn't really have a good grip on these kinds of mental disabilities, whether it be autism or Down syndrome or, maybe my whole thing was it was probably just a brain injury as a little kid, and he's just,
I could see that.
But especially during this time, there's a lot of depictions of that as just someone being slow. And this particular pairing reminded me of, like, the whole George and Lenny thing of Mice and Men, because you got the scrawny smart guy, clearly the leader between the two, and the big lumbering
dummy,
moron is basically yeah. And so that's kind of the way, when I was first reading this, that's kind of the way I took it, is that kind of. And they do tend to, if you want to be real, have the most fun as far as their adventure throughout this book. It is the most, like, the back and forth. It's good.
Look, if I had one traveling partner from this book, it'd probably be Tom, because we're going to have a blast.
Yeah. And so, and up to this point, anytime any of our characters meet is kind of, we mentioned last time that people seem to be being pulled between two figures. One that's clearly a good person and the other one's a bad person. It's pretty vague up to this point of the book, other than the fact that we did meet Randall Flagg. We'll get to him here in a minute. But this is the first time where that gets kind of switched, because shortly after they meet, we meet another character, Julie Lawry, who is problematic. Problematic to say the least.
She is the epitome of white trash, bro.
And it's really kind of the first time, like, obviously Stephen King has his villains, Randall Flagg, Pennywise, all these, epic villains. But I think it's also fair to say that most of the time in his books, it's like the human figures, not the monsters, that are the most like, fuck them. Like,
they're
I
the
do
most
not,
diabolical,
Yeah.
despicable.
So, of course, from it, you can mention Henry Bowers. Like, he's just nasty all the way through and through. Like, there's no nice or good to him. He's just mean. And well, Julie Lawry is clearly cut from that same cloth, where it's here at the end of the world. Everyone's dying around you, and you decide to just be mean for no reason.
Like, she tries to convince them to leave Tom.
Well,
Like,
she was trying to like pit them against each other, and there's like this whole scene where Nick's trying to get something across, and she's purposely misconstruing it for Tom.
So Nick tries to get her to tell Tom his name, because Tom, Nick's whole thing is he writes down and you read it off, because he can't speak and he can't hear.
Yeah, Tom can't read. So
Tom can't read. So he's been traveling with them, and there's no communication with each other though. And
I got some, because Tom does, like he mentions, Tom has these flashes of like inspiration where he figures it out.
yeah, that's true, but there's no real communication.
Yeah, like there's nothing.
And he meets this girl that he can communicate with, and he tries to get her to help, and she refuses to.
Yeah,
then after that, she finally gives in, still being a little bitch. And then Tom's sick, so he's trying to get him to drink some Pepto-Bismol, and Tom doesn't want to do it. He's acting like a child about it,
Yeah.
And instead of helping, like Nick's asking her to, she just tells Tom that it's poison. Don't drink it.
Yeah. And so there's things, end up going in a bad direction. And they end up splitting off from her because she's nuts. And so they go off, and now it's Nick and Tom once again. And then one of the more actually disturbing and horrific scenes of the book comes, but not from any kind of monster. It's from nature itself, where like the whole tornado scene is, because of their particular situation, it is a spooky, super tense moment.
It's terrifying. Like you survived all this shit to be taken out by some wind.
Yeah, pretty much. And so they're riding their bikes along, and
Tom freaks out.
Yeah, Tom
freaks out and just darts to a barn, and
Nick he can't hear it, or
Yeah, he has no clue what's going on. He just sees Tom going that way and is just like, I gotta get Tom. I gotta get Tom back to what we're doing, and follows Tom in there, and that saves his life.
Mm-hmm. And like the whole scene is pretty chaotic. And just at the last moment, Nick turns around and says, "Oh, okay, it's a tornado." Like, all right. And yeah, like the them being in there in the dark with this tornado ripping apart everything is a super tense and chaotic moment. And one of the podcasts I've listened to about this particular book brings up an interesting point about how they would film this scene. And I haven't seen the newest.
I just finished it.
And so did they put this scene in? They didn't put the scene in it? Okay. So if they ever did come to like filming this podcaster mentioned that.
Watch Twister. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, but it's because of Nick being deaf, like switching back and forth between the silent
And
chaotic of the moment to
then-
like the roaring wind.
yeah, that'd be dope.
Switching back and forth between Tom and Nick's perception of it.
So
That'd be an interesting way.
something I want to point out about that scene, and I might be wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a minute since I read that part. When they leave that place, aren't they terrified of like going back in there? They don't want to go back because they felt a dark presence. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna get
isn't it
into
implied that Flag is in there with them?
yeah, it's very strongly implied to the point where I'm pretty sure you're supposed to agree with them and believe that like he was down in there with them trying to avoid the tornado just like them. Which is interesting because I'm gonna just put this little tidbit in here. Spoiler alert, so if you don't want to be spoiled, just go ahead and fast forward like 30 seconds. There's your warning. But the interesting part is there's a tornado that's it's somehow linked with Flag because his presence, whether he's there or not, his presence is all through that scene. The next time after this book that we meet Flag is in Wizard and Glass, the 4th Dark Tower book, and it's directly tied to Wizard of Oz, where there's another tornado. So I don't know if there's some connection in his mind, Stephen King's
Or it's just
mind,
a coincidence.
or it's just an interesting coincidence that I've noticed, but that's...
So you just mentioned that he was it's kind of implied he was in there maybe getting, seeking shelter.
Yeah, seeking shelter.
Same as them. I don't think that's the case because it states throughout the book that he causes chaos wherever he goes.
Do you think he was the tornado?
I don't think he was a tornado, but I think he caused it.
Trying to take him out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we are up to this point and later on, we're led to believe that out of these survivors that are coalescing around the next character we'll talk about.
He knows that Nick's a threat.
Yeah, Nick seems to be like the most powerful, whatever. I guess we'll reference the White again as far as Stephen King's source of goodness. He's clearly got that the most out of all of them. And so that figure that they're coalescing around, we actually meet her shortly after this. Of course, we'll get to Larry and that stuff in a minute because I have something I want to ask you. But the first new character after Tom that we really get to know is Mother Abigail. Is the lady in their dreams that we mentioned in the last episode. But so Mother Abigail, to me, isn't really a major character in this book because other than this scene that we're talking about where she's introduced, we only get like 2 other scenes with her that at all matter.
She's major in the aspect that she's important.
Yeah, she's an important character, yes, but she's not.
But she's not, like, she does not get a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't do a lot either,
No.
other than just
No.
her
going to get the chicken was like,
yeah, like I was
not gonna lie, it was dope. Like,
yeah,
but
that is the most
that's the
she
most
actually
yeah.
does. Well, she does prepare food for everyone, which
well,
is why
that's
she's going
part
to
of
get the
that.
chickens.
She's getting that,
but-
and then like, it's all together.
And so Mother Abigail we meet, and she is, whether you're talking about the edition that's set in the 70s or the edition that's set, or I guess it'd be the 80s because it's the future, but it was published in the 70s.
Yeah, it was set in the 80s, and then it was
Or
redone
into the
and set in
90s.
the 90s.
Yeah. Whichever one you're reading, she's quite old. If you're reading the 70s one, she was born in the 1800s. And so she's like well into...
In the other one, it's set in 1990, and she's 104 years old.
So yeah, she'd still be in the 1800s. But either way, there's the... well, the reason I mentioned specifically that date is because the time in the flashback, depending on that 20-year gap, there'd be different politics in the town, slightly.
Yeah.
But either way, it's a little black girl growing up in a pretty much all white town there in Hemingford Home.
In the South.
Yeah. And so...
Well, kind of.
I mean,
it's Nebraska. Not really. Never
It was
mind.
in the Midwest, whatever. Either way, you're talking, teens, 20s,
Yeah,
you know,
it's all the South back
1900s,
then.
like, yeah. But her family, of course, got some land after the whole Civil War and, freeing the slaves. Certain slaves got certain portions of land. Her dad held on to it, so she had all this farmland, and that was their major income, obviously. By the time, her and her great-grandchildren, I think, are signing paperwork and dealing with it, it's, dwindled down to basically 100th of what it originally was. But to her, it's fine because she couldn't handle much more than that by herself anyways. So she got this little piece of land living by herself. All her children are grandparents and off, But with her, she's the first character in Stephen King, almost the only character in all of Stephen King who is devoutly religious, but yet not insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess you can say she's the redemption of religious characters in Stephen King. To where you're like, yeah, she's just as devout as, Margaret White or, the lady from The Gunslinger that we mentioned. I can't think of her name exactly right now.
Or the woman from The Mist.
Yeah. She's just, if not more, religious than any of them. And yet she's,
But she's
quite
not
a good
psychotic
person.
bitch.
Yeah. And so we learn all this and we get some backstory of like she's very, strong-headed, strong-hearted. She's very strong character altogether.
Hell of a guitar player.
Hell of a guitar player, hell of a singer, still doing it today. Well, in the story anyway. And you were talking about the scene where we really get, that shown to us on the page of all these people are coming to visit her. She got to make some dinner. She got to go get her some chickens. It's a little bit of a walk down the road to the coop.
And for her old ass, that means an all-day walk.
Yeah, pretty much. She ends up...
Because she doesn't have a coop. She had to go to her neighbors to get the coop.
Yeah.
And, that's a walk.
Yeah. And so she ends up taking a nap when she gets there and has a dream. Old boy Randall Flagg ends up being in the dream. It's pretty horrific scene, that whole situation. Basically turning one of her favorite memories into a horror show.
Yeah.
So there's that. That was a very much a Stephen King-esque scene.
It's nice to see a scene between those two, the opposing
this is pretty
forces,
much the only time we get any kind of...
I think it's their
meeting.
only interaction at all.
Yeah. And basically he's, trying to do what he's doing to everyone and get them to turn away. Don't do all this. Don't oppose me. Don't take the stand and so on and so forth. But she continues on anyways, makes her big old meal, and here they are coming. So we'll get back to her some more later, but suffice it to say that she is, about as opposite of Randall Flagg as you can get.
Yeah.
And so next, let's cover Larry's story, because to me, like I said before, he's very much...
Hold on. Before we go to Larry, we got to back up just a little bit because we're not quite done with Nick. Because Nick introduces us to another big character in the book, semi-big character in the book, Ralph Brittner.
Oh yeah.
Because he's in Nick's party to go when they go meet Mother Abigail.
That's
So we
true.
actually meet Ralph before Mother Abigail.
That's true because they after the whole tornado mess, they end up making their way back to the road, and they're shortly thereafter picked up by good old boy Ralph Bretner, very much the Stu Redman cut, like, except even more. I would say more of the friendly, neighborly kind. Stu does have a very stoic sense about him, where Ralph is very much more
Ralph's your
backslapping.
neighbor that's going to come over and hang out on your back porch all day.
Yeah. But he's very important character down the road. We just get a short snippet of him, but
He's likable. He's likable from the jump.
yeah, and takes very kindly to Nick and Tom for that matter, as far as picking up strangers at the end of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is true with that whole. So does the Larry stuff does happen. So we also meet Nadine Cross before we meet Mother Abigail.
That's true.
So Larry at this point is by himself. Rita's done taking all her pills or enough of her pills where
She's done.
she's done.
Larry's struggling with it.
Yeah, Larry's that's
And he's just focused on getting to the beach, pretty much.
yeah.
And he's heading that way. He's finding booze, getting drunk when he can.
Somebody's following him.
Yeah.
Or that's
He's got
the
this-
sense he starts to get.
Yeah, he's got the feeling that one or at least two people are following him.
Yeah, he's being watched closely.
And so, yeah, he goes to sleep one night, and there's a very intense scene where a little boy runs up and almost kills him. Larry doesn't wake up through this whole thing. He runs up with a butcher knife. This kid is in underwear, looking an absolute mess with a butcher knife. Like, this
Scrawny
kid
little
is
kid.
feral,
Yeah.
about to just shank Larry in his sleep. And then Nadine Cross comes out and stops him. She's a motherly figure for him. And then the next day, she approaches Larry.
Yeah. And at first, like Larry, I mean, obviously from his first actual interaction with them, it takes a while for him to even want anything to do with any of them because it's like, the little dude tried to kill me. Like,
Yeah.
and so he's very opposed to the kid at least. But he's kind of taken with the lady.
Nadine
she's
she's fine.
Yeah, she's described in such a way that it's clear that she's highly attractive. And you soon find out that she is, because, I mean, at this point we know Larry is an extremely complex character as far as his mental situation and his emotional situation and his history. Like, there's a lot going on inside Larry Underwood. Nadine, we quickly find out, is just as fucking complicated, if not a little more.
I'd say more so.
So, like you kind of said, what we get out of them first is there's some hostility that takes a minute for them to even mingle as a company.
So essentially they agree to travel together. Larry's watchful of Joe. He does not trust him.
Yeah,
That's what they're calling the little boy because
they don't know.
They don't
He
know
doesn't
his
really
name.
talk.
But he likes Nadine a lot. They get along really, really well. Joe fucking hates Larry. You can tell. And then one day, Larry he finds a guitar, and Larry's a musician, so Larry starts playing.
Yeah, fucking
Next thing you
around.
know, Joe is just like,
He's all about it.
yeah, he's in love with it, and he hands it to him, and he goes to play, and like just copies what he heard. You know, he fucks up a little here and there, but
Still some kind of savant where he's just like, all right, you can play the guitar.
exactly. So it does not take long from there for Joe and Larry to start clicking, and then
They start connecting somewhat.
they go to this dealership to get some motorcycles, and Larry needs help to fuel them up essentially.
Yeah.
And he calls Joe over to help, and like that moment's very significant for them. And,
Yeah, there's
and that's the real turning point, in my opinion, in their relationship.
There's a tense scene where Larry needs to have his hands down in a delicate place under this grate, and he needs Joe to hold the grate up, but at any point,
If Joe dropped it, his fingers are gone.
yeah, it's done. And obviously, Larry being a guitarist,
Those are important.
those are important to him, even if, there is no show business anymore, but he still wants to play, so that whole scene, he has to trust Joe. And I think a lot of that is showing Joe that you trust him that much made Joe trust Larry even more. And so that was a connecting moment for them. Whether either of them really grasped that, you could tell from that moment on they were basically tight.
Yeah. And honestly, we get a lot of Larry in this part, but it's mostly just him and Nadine getting to know each other.
Yeah, we get a lot of Larry because up to this point he is one of our main perspective characters.
Yeah,
But it's mostly exploring these other characters through him, kind of.
so it doesn't really let you you don't really get to know his party very well in this part, though. You'll get to know some of the characters later in this part or in part 3,
Yeah.
but you'll get to, his party consists of another girl named Lucy, who
Lucy
he
Swan.
ends up getting with because him and Nadine just ain't gonna work.
Yeah, I was going to get to that in a second about Nadine.
And then a character named everyone calls Judge. He's a retired judge, Judge Ferris.
Yeah.
There's several others in his party, but those are the ones that actually have names.
Those are the important ones, quote unquote. And let's just go ahead and cover this about Nadine and get this out of the way. You learn through this part and going forward pretty much for the rest of this whole part of the book that she has a specific destiny, it seems anyways. That whole concept is left kind of vague in the sense that, we make our own destiny, whatever, but clearly she's known for a while, most of her life, that she's meant for something, and that something is Randall Flagg. There's like a whole thing where she's talked about her past, where there's obviously being a beautiful woman, she's had multiple chances to lose her virginity and go on with all these relationships, and something inside her has always made her say no and turn away from that, to the point where she's basically, even before the superflu shit, basically secluded herself from the world, which is why she is the way she is. And so, yeah, that kind of casts quite a pall over the rest of her story, knowing that, and, when they do, which shortly comes up when they do get to Mother Abigail and link up there's that whole tense scene between her and Nadine.
Yeah. Nadine, you can tell, didn't want to meet Mother Abigail anyway, and she was kind of rude, but Mother Abigail don't play that shit, bro. Yeah. She's a old sassy black lady, man. She ain't gonna play that. She gonna call you on your shit, and she did.
And there was clearly Mother Abigail senses something there, and there's that whole thing where she basically says, choose Larry and not this, dark bridegroom that you have. It wasn't that directly said, but that's basically.
She I'm pretty sure she said, you have a good man right here, but you won't like if you just
Yeah.
open your eyes, it'd be
Yeah.
a good woman or some shit like that.
Yeah, but that's basically, choose Larry, don't go to Flag. But there's a couple of moments where Larry tries to, because he clearly wants her in that way, in every way. Like he's
Yeah.
taken with her all the way.
He tried a few times and she just kept
Yeah.
turning it down.
And so, because Larry did have this other girl who was clearly immediately taken with him, Lucy, he goes on and goes there with that, and they end up. Joe ends up even referring to Lucy as Lucy Mama and Nadine Mama.
Yeah, so you got Nadine mom
and
and Lucy mom, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
And then Larry's just Larry.
Larry is Larry. He's basically Pops, but so yeah, let's talk about the community in Boulder. Like we said, Nick's party, and Larry's party. Let's talk about Stu's party, because there is something with Stu's party that happens that's super interesting,
So
and it's like a straight shootout.
oh, that's not even what I was thinking. But yeah, that man, Stu's party, dude. They see some shit.
Oh, you were talking about the whole dude getting the
surgery.
appendix,
Yeah.
appendicitis as appendix
But
burst.
We'll get to that. Let's talk the shootout since you brought that up first.
Well, we'll talk about both of them, because with the appendix thing, like nowadays that don't even mean shit really, because the whole procedure is so simple and straightforward, and it's literally an everyday thing.
it didn't mean shit then either.
I mean, it meant a little more than though,
but it means something to a fucking factory worker on the road.
yeah, and after in the middle of the apocalypse or whatever, I get that, but that's basically my point is that like back then it meant a little more than it does now, but obviously when you're not at the hospital and you don't have the right tools and it's just a dude, I think he made calculators for a living. Like he
he built calculators and worked part-time at a Texaco.
Yeah, and so having to perform surgery on the side of the road in like a windstorm, basically, it's I understand it presents a problem, but I'm saying that the intensity that Stephen King wrote this scene with, while very good and everything, it seems unnecessarily dramatic when a couple of scenes later you have a shootout that happens so quickly and
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The fact that he pulled it off is what I'm saying. It is impressive, but it's like, all right, like, because one thing I do want to mention about the scene that's different from other, works that have shootouts in them is that not everyone is a perfect shot. Because if you think about it, like on, various movies,
The hero always just
like
takes them
Sons of
down.
Anarchy or Walking Dead or any of these kind of shows, like, yeah, everyone's just pulling off headshots left and right like it's
Not Stu.
nothing. And this is a very much more realistic situation where, like, most of these people ain't even pulled a trigger in their life. This is the first time, And so, yeah, it goes about as well as you would think. It's a mess. It's not a smooth operation, just put it that way, compared to an actual operation that they had not all that long before, which didn't go smoothly either, but, just that contrast, because those are the two scenes we get of that group before they're in Boulder.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting, like, to me, it seems a lot of Stephen King was like, what's an exciting thing that can happen to this group? Because there wasn't a lot of, character work to be done, because the characters in that group were
Developed pretty damn well.
Yeah, already pretty developed.
Up to the point they needed to be, at least.
Yeah.
No, it did feel like filler, not going to lie.
Yeah.
But it is So exciting.
Oh yeah. Like the writing is done beautifully, and the suspense
and
is
it
good.
does introduce an important character later, Dana Jurgens. They were in the
And we get
shootout.
Susan Stern.
Or yeah, Susan Stern and Dana Jurgens, because they're together in that.
Well, I think a lot of it was more of the a conception of like the types of shit that would happen in the scenario. Like you would probably get some crazy freaks out and out in the wilds with their little sex slave harem.
Yeah, so the shootout is that our group has is with a guy with a group of guys that have gotten together and are going around with what they call the zoo, which is just women that they abduct and they have their way with. They pull this thing to try to trick people. That's been working apparently, because Sue tells Stu's party after this is all over.
Now you get the whole story after the shootout.
They trick people and they kill all the guys or they kill whatever men there are. Old ladies they'll kill, and then they take the women.
Yeah. And so, needless to say, we all understand what was going on there, and obviously it's implied like what would have happened to Franny, who was pregnant during this period. Like, I guess you're supposed to be a little more afraid for her because of the pregnancy. I don't know what exactly the point of the contrast that Stephen King did play there was, but obviously you're supposed to imagine some horrible things possibly happening, which did happen to these two other characters there was like 3 or 4 of them, but Susan Stern and Dana Jurgens are the only one that go on.
There were 4, 3 of them had names. I don't remember the third.
I know one of them ended up getting
She was older
shot in the
and
head
had
or
she had a lot of issues, like not wanting to talk to people and shit. She was fucked up in the head from everything, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And then the other one gets shot in the fucking face during the whole thing. So she gone.
Yeah. And so like we end up in Boulder. All of our characters that we've met so far start intermingling. We do get some flashes of what's happening on the other side of the mountains. Flag and his group, we find out that Lloyd did, in fact, he is in the upper ranks of...
He is Flag's right-hand man.
Yeah,
Flag
he's the top dog, apparently.
You meet a few other characters over there.
Realize it's a very organized, super strict, like a very, it's weird to say, like an authoritarian utopia. Like everything's going well, everyone has to, everyone's doing their part, but you figure out that's because the Dark Man is a hard guy.
He's the hard case.
Yeah, and so there's other parts of this we learn about Trash Can Man's journey as well.
Oh, Trashy's journey, bro. It's trash.
So like like the last time we saw him, he was making his way to the Dark Man. He very much wants to join that. He wants to burn for him.
So we left off with Trash Can Man at part 1 with right after the big explosion, right?
He just took out
burned
like
himself.
whole
where he
town.
burned the whole town for days.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Ended up being the whole county that basically burnt down.
So he's just walking along trying to get to Flag, and he gets picked up.
Yep.
And the man, he does not really care for the guy that picks him up. Pretty quickly, he can tell that he doesn't like him.
Yeah.
But he's scared shitless of him, and this is where you're introduced to the kid, who is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated and diabolical King villains out there. This dude is a piece of shit.
Yeah. So the kid, you learn, is very much full of himself. Thinks very highly of himself. He has a very interesting way of talking, which I found endearing for the character. I like when, when writers do that and gives their characters like interesting ways of talking.
I do too.
And so, you don't tell me, I tell you. And so that definitely makes him stand out as, he doesn't really last all that long in this book, but we get a whole bunch of them. And
he kind of gets referenced later.
Yeah, there's some references to him later and everything, but you can tell this is very much a part of the book that came in with the expansion, simply because there's certain tactics used in this part of the book that's not used again. Like, I'm pretty sure the wolves that they meet, that's basically like flags, the replacement for the weasels we met earlier with Mother Abigail and everything. I think that was supposed to, like, they were going to be reappearing, but he just ended up never using them again. And so when he went back to add stuff back in, like, that got put back in. At least that's the way it seems to me. But I thought the whole wolves effect was interesting because, like, you immediately recognize it as a problem as it's happening. But one thing I noticed about the kids section is a return of a problematic thing that we mentioned in the Gunslinger, and that's gun barrels being shoved into uncomfortable portions of the body.
Yes.
So that was clearly something that King has thought about before, because this is the second time it's happened. If it was just the once, that's one thing. But it's the second time. But this time it's even more disturbing because it's done with such glee.
For one of them.
Yeah, for one of them. But yeah, needless to say, the kid isn't very kind to Trash Can Man during their time together. Although I feel like he thinks he is being kind. So do with that what you will.
He gave him a ride. He didn't make him keep walking. He even brought that up. Like,
yeah.
No.
So like, it was a very uncomfortable portion of the book, something that Trash Can Man had to deal with. But eventually that's taken care of, like I said, with the wolves. And they end up leading him right to where he wants to go.
Yeah. Like, not only do they like
take care of that
take care of the kid, but they also, like, 3 or 4 of them walk off with Trash Can Man and completely escort him the rest of the way.
Yep.
Or not the rest of the way, but they escort
get him
to
where he needs to get to
where
realize,
he's free through that tunnel that he was stuck.
Yeah. And so Trash Can Man eventually does make it to Las Vegas, or Cibola as he repeatedly calls it. Ends up going to sleep, and we get a little bit from a couple of the other bad characters that we know, like the Rat Man is there, and of course Lloyd.
And you meet Whitney and Ace.
Yep. And yeah, so Trash Can Man starts to make actual friends, but then he also ends up having to participate in killing one of those friends, one of his first friends. And so you very much get to see, like, yeah, there's some quote-unquote good going on in Las Vegas.
But they literally had to crucify their friend because he liked to do too much cocaine.
Yeah. And so while all that is going on, of course, over in Boulder, they end up calling it the Boulder Free Zone. They want to put Mother Abigail in charge, basically, make her queen. She does not want to do all that, but they're willing to. But they end up, Glenn basically talks them through, like, let's go ahead and just stick with the democracy that we're all used to, and we can, kind of fill in the gaps from there. They end up kind of doing the town council version, where they put together a committee. Glenn even suggests going ahead with the tradition and a democracy of fixing the votes, which was a funny way for him to go about putting it. But and you would kind of assume that Glenn would end up kind of being the natural leader of such a committee, but he does in fact not end up being.
No, he just like he's the without them though it wouldn't have worked because
Oh yeah, like he guides them all the way
political
through.
guy. He handles everything.
He guides them through the whole process. But you end up with they want to put Lloyd or Harold on there.
Nick shuts it down.
Yeah, Nick's like, nah. He got super bad vibes off of
And then,
Harold, and even Glenn was like, probably not. Stu, it was really Stu that was like, we need Harold on this because he's the smart guy.
Yeah, Stu was really the only one that really wanted Harold. And then they had Sue that from
Sue Snell.
Stu's party. But
Or not Sue Snell, Susan Stern.
yeah, Susan Stern.
Sue Snell's from Carrie, my bad.
And then or no, they didn't have Susan.
She
ended up being an alternative because they had the doctor, the guy that was acting as the doctor.
Yeah, he was like
and
the
he
town
was
vet.
too busy, and he suggested her, I believe.
Yeah.
Either way, she took his place. But instead of Harold, because Nick just refused Harold, he would not go.
I think it was
Ralph actually is the one that first brought up putting Larry on the committee because he was really impressed with him, and immediately Franny was supportive of that.
Yeah, because Franny and Larry had a couple of meetings where they kind of clicked as friends and kind of understood each other. I feel like that was because Larry's the rock star and Franny is the fan of rock stars, so they kind of had a similar pop culture, reference to fall back on type of. I feel like that was really where that came from. And then Stu and Larry's first couple of meetings, like they clearly were like, all right, we on the same page about all this.
Yeah, Larry really got along with most people pretty well.
But
pretty quickly.
And I feel like really the guiding hand here, as much as we put on Glenn, it is pretty much Nick that's the guiding hand, because pretty much all these names we just put kept going back to Nick.
That's true.
For like, this was the right thing, right? This is the right thing, right? So I feel like, although he can't speak, Nick is like the natural translator for Mother Abigail. Yeah,
They, in fact, in the newest
adaptation
of it, she actually says that. She's like, Mother Abigail tells Nick she wants him to be her voice, and he's just like, how?
Yeah. And with Glenn, he's more of like the wise counsel, not so much as a guide, but like, this is probably what's going to happen. And like we mentioned in the last one, he kind of does, he pretty much called it, like where this was going to go. Oh, there's probably going to be another group of people. And he even suggests that they're probably doing human sacrifices and stuff like that, and he tends to be right about that. But one thing I did want to mention is that Stephen King wanted this to be like a, American modern-day Lord of the Rings, which, whether you say he succeeded in that or not, it's not really important. It's the fact that that's what one of his main attempts was. I feel like part of what he really accomplished is taking something like Lord of the Rings, or the epic scope of Lord of the Rings, and placing it on a horror novel.
Yeah.
Because you really don't get a lot of that. Even like the classic horror novels are really situational, one-off events like Dracula or Frankenstein. Like
it's a very specific.
Like, you can try to make it epic, but it's not the same kind of epic that Lord of the Rings or something like that would be. And so I feel like that's really what he ended up doing, with kind of Lord of the Rings as like a backdrop. Obviously, you mentioned he's got his Sauron, he's got his Frodo, and all of that. But as far as the themes go, it's more about, taking a stand, and that's literally the whole point of Lord of the Rings is, taking a stand, not letting the world come to an end because of some evil dude's, wishes. And so that's really, but the speaking of the theme of this, we keep putting so much on Nick, and he's also the one that kind of stands as the crux of this whole novel. And the reason I put that is because we mentioned Harold being more of a problem. And so with Harold being, jealous and everything, that starts to build up, and him and Nadine, I don't want to say they get together.
They kind of do.
They more have like
Flag tells Nadine to keep Harold happy, and basically, Flag uses Nadine to make sure that Harold does what he needs to do. He uses him as a chess piece. Essentially, he's just a pawn.
And so, Harold ends up basically going crazy, getting so jealous to the point that he joins Flag. He ends up basically, Flag kind of got a hold on him, and he ends up building a bomb.
And we will get more into that next time when we'll finish up part 2 and do part 3 with that, because part 3 is way shorter and there's way less to talk about.
Yeah. I just wanted to make this joke about Harold, though, is that he's kind of a ticking time bomb, so to speak.
Hey.
But we'll get more into this and finish off The Stand by Stephen King in the next episode of The People's History of Horror. And you have anything else to say?
Not really. Just keep it strange.
Nope, signing off.